live. Yes, we are. Hi, everybody. Okay, so forgive the chirpy introduction. I was just practicing some of my vocals just now. Yeah, I really wanted to talk about something quite serious, actually. And it was this video by Brittany Simon talking about, it was talking about older men dating, underage girls or young women. And, I saw a lot of creepy dudes saying that basically they would go, to whichever age is like legally youngest. And yeah, of course it's disgusting and creepy and awful. But I feel like, with respect to Brittany Simon, because she really laid out an incredibly well-researched, comprehensive look at this subject matter, I feel like a lot of the familiar beats of things that we've already heard, like your bros have got to call it out and, all that type of stuff. Like she really went in depth into this, but she touched on stuff that we've already heard. And I feel like when it comes to the concept of abuse in general, if we are really going to dismantle abuse, we must understand it way more clearly and in a way more nuanced fashion than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline 3 main points as to why abuse happens and why it continues. The first reason is we don't pay enough attention to victims and their feelings, right? The first thing is that we don't notice when somebody is being preyed on. The second thing we don't do is that when we notice they're being preyed on in a way that might not be illegal, but clearly makes them uncomfortable, we don't step in and we don't protect them. We don't do anything to defend them. We don't do anything to say, look, this is not acceptable behavior. Can you back the fuck off? We don't do that. We don't protect people who have been preyed on, right? We don't step in to defend that person in a meaningful fashion. I'm not talking about the way somebody stepped in yesterday. That was some baiting bullshit, right? I'm talking about prioritizing the victim of an attack or prioritizing somebody that you perceive to be the victim rather than prioritizing the person that is doing the attacking or prioritizing trying to punish them. For example, I was in a NatWest bank, right? And there was a customer there who appeared to be aggressive towards the staff and, was being loud and all the rest of it. And, instead of being focused on punishing him, I was focused on solving the problem for everybody. He said he couldn't get up to the desk and stand up there for long because he had a knee injury or something. So I said to the bank teller, is it okay if I get the thing for him to bring it back so that, so that everybody's happy? And then they said, no, it's okay. That's the first thing I did. I offered a solution, so that everybody was happy, right? I didn't necessarily call out his behavior, which in an abuse situation or a situation involving inappropriate sexual language, you might step in and you might say, hey, knock it off, right? I offered a solution, right then and there in the bank. I offered a solution that made everyone happy and that minimized abuse for the victim. That is the thing that people need to prioritize. Minimizing abuse for the victim, prioritizing the comfort of the person who is being made to feel uncomfortable. Even Mean Girls gives an example of something like that. When Regina George spots Katie Heron being sexually harassed by, one of her friend's boyfriends, like Gretchen Wiener's boyfriend, Regina steps in and calls him out on his behavior, but she also checks in with Katie to see how she feels about the situation. Checks in with her and says, well, she acts in a really blunt way about it. She says, do you want to have sex with him? And then Katie's like, no, thank you. And then she says to Jason, see, she doesn't want it. Get lost. Okay. So coming back to that NatWest situation, Not only did I find a solution to the issue, I basically found small ways to alleviate the stress from the people at the other end of the aggressive behavior. So without calling him out, I made them laugh about the situation. I eased their tension about the situation. So basically, without being abusive to him and making it worse, I basically prioritized making them feel good and making them feel comfortable in a situation that would otherwise have been uncomfortable for them. That is one way to prioritize the victim in the situation. That is one way to do it. You make them feel good rather than focusing on this punitive bullshit with calling out the other person, because it's the punitive bullshit that can be weaponized very easily and very quickly. Doing the right thing is not about weaponizing a situation. It's about making sure that harm to other people, emotional or physical, is minimized. That's what it's about. So that is one example, like a couple of examples, myself and Regina George, that we've given, even though Regina George weaponized that shit. Those are two examples I've given of how people can prioritize victims. And that's just a really small example. Like if somebody's making sexual comments, check in with the victim and listen to the body language. If anything about their body language reads that they are uncomfortable or they are, unless it's a child, in which case step in immediately. I don't care if the child knows or not, because the child is not going to know. If a person is visibly uncomfortable, like, and you can tell physically, nip it in the bud and say, look, that you're making them feel uncomfortable, knock it off. So that's the first reason why cycles of abuse continue and why abuse happens in the first place, because not enough attention is paid to the victim in the situation and their feelings. And we often wait for it to become unlawful or illegal or wildly obvious before we step in, right? So that leads me to the second problem of why abuse cycles happen and why they continue. The desire for emotional catharsis. We live in a world that prioritizes dopamine addiction. And what that means is that we are looking essentially for gratification and for stimulation, pleasant stimulation. It doesn't even have to be pleasant. It can just be stimulation. That's why a lot of people stress watch and hate watch things, because they need that emotional catharsis to get feelings out that have been building from situations where they have to keep their emotions hidden or keep their emotions numb. So it leads to these situations where we need extreme reactions to know how we feel or to know how to handle those feelings, which is why we often wait until things get really bad before we step in and do something. And even then, we're focused on punishing the abuser, dopamine chasing, rather than actually tending to the victim. That desire for emotional catharsis from dopamine addiction, from needing gratification, from needing, what else? Gratification, and from needing stimulation. That is often what leads to abuse situations getting wildly out of control. This is the thing that nobody tells you about doing the right thing. It's boring and thankless, especially if you're doing it at a time when there's no obvious illegalities going on, especially at a time where you might be seen as a buzzkill or as, you might be seen as a buzzkill or no fun, or, you might not get anything out of it. Like, this is the thing that people don't like in this world. People can tolerate evil. People can tolerate good. But there are three things that people find murderously, and I mean murderously, difficult to tolerate. They can't tolerate being annoyed. They can't tolerate being bored, and they can't tolerate doing something and not getting something out of it. Even people who think they're, pretty calm most of the time, People are literally more angered by annoying people or by boring people or by, like, even I'm a victim of this. People are literally more annoyed or more murderously angry at boring people, annoying people, or people who don't appear to be grateful for anything. We're more annoyed by people like that than by actual abusers, actual predators, actually evil people. And if you don't take my word for it, like, just look at the way we treat abusers in the mainstream media. Look at the way that we treat them. Oh, but we're powerless. No, we're not. There are billions of us. We're not powerless at all. It's just that calling out that behavior means we have to call out the small ways in which we contribute to abuse thriving. That's the main issue that we're dealing with here. And doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, again, it's fucking boring. To do that in and day out is fucking boring. No one ever tells you that. Everybody always tells you that, oh, it feels good to do the right thing. No, it doesn't. Not all the time. There is a reason why so many people feel so good, when they're being violent or when they're doing something, that they feel like is the wrong thing to do. Like, it's a rush. Do you understand what I mean? It's a rush of higher stakes that keep you on your toes, that keep you mentally sharp, that keep you alert. That's why some people are addicts. That's why some people are addicted to not even just drugs, but work as well, because there's stakes. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's stakes, and there's a reward system that's constantly being triggered. When you're doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, how big is that reward system in your brain? It's not that big. It's pretty low dopamine to call out behavior that isn't really illegal to do. The stakes are low. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's boring, thankless, and annoying to constantly do the right thing and to constantly try to get other people to do the right thing. That's what the left and progressives are accused of all the time, being boring buzzkills. Because doing the right thing, what media can you make of that? What creativity can you make of that will keep people in their fucking seat? If we're not talking about the worst person in the world, we're talking about the best person in the world going through the worst fucking things. Come on now. It's boring. And again, people are averse to boredom. And I don't care if people think this is wrong. It's not wrong. I'm not wrong. People are averse to boredom. People are averse to annoyance and offense. And people are averse to doing things that don't automatically gain them gratification. Even if the gratification is internal, it's still gratification. You're still getting something out of it. And most people are just not built like that. So the solution to that is that we have to get used to being bored sometimes. We have to get used to being annoyed and offended sometimes. We have to get used to not being thanked all the time for doing stuff that we're supposed to be doing. We have to learn how to be bored, be annoyed, be offended, and not be thanked without wanting to kill a bitch. You have to learn to be able to do that. And the fact that we still can't is a problem. Okay, so that's the second reason why abuse continues. It's because we let things get bad for the emotional catharsis. And we don't like to admit that to ourselves. That's a really ugly part of human nature, but it's the truth. The third reason is that a lot of us are not taught what true consent is. The only reason why the idea of consent came up is because of the kink community. Ironically, it's because of like the things that we hold taboo. That's the only reason why consent even comes up. But most of us, from the time we are children, we are not taught what true consent actually is. We're taught that certain things are wrong, like sexual molestation, and we're taught that certain things are wrong, but like there's We're not really taught how to assert our own bodily autonomy as children. And we're not really taught to assert our emotional autonomy as children either. Because quite frankly, a lot of these fucking parents don't know what the hell they're doing. And they are, the likelihood is that they are more mature than their parents. So how are they going to know to teach the children, what consent is, or, how to understand their own bodies? Like, how are they going to know that unless they go out looking for the information? Of course, things are better now, but again, we're coming back to conservative politics. So everything that we've learned about consent is about to take massive steps back. Do you understand what I mean? Massive steps back. So a lot of us don't really know what consent is. And if we look through our relationships, it doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be illegal. When have you tried to engage with somebody and they told you to stop and you didn't listen? Like verbally engage with somebody and they told you, stop, I don't want to talk about it, and you didn't listen. How many times have you asked somebody for a hug and they told you no and you didn't listen? How many times maybe have you tickled a kid and the kid, even though they were laughing, they were saying no, stop, and you didn't stop? How many times have, you kind of poked somebody, I don't know, you poked a mate or something like that. They told you, no, don't fucking do that to me, and you still kept on. All of these things build up. All of these things are not necessarily violating consent, but like you're stepping over somebody's boundaries in order for you to have fun and in order for you to feel good. It's an overstep of other people's boundaries. If you keep bothering people and they tell you no, you're fucking with their boundaries. You're stepping over their line. But this is the thing. This is something that is done to everybody all the fucking time. Everything that we think is consensual, like our democracy, everything in our lives is revolved around eroding our consent as much as possible. What do you think social engineering is? What do you think propaganda is? Propaganda is trying to affect our mindset to manipulate us into making decisions that we think are consensual. And this is regardless of political allegiance. We don't have consent as much as we think we do. Our idea of consent is skewed. We don't have it as much as we think. Progressive politics are the closest thing that we can come to having actual consent and actual autonomy. And even then, it's not all the way there. Even then, it's not all the way there, because it involves manipulating people into believing one type of thing, right? It involves manipulating people into believing some things that are against their interest to believe. Even the left and progressives do that, let alone the fucking far right, let alone conservatives. And think about the far right and conservatives. They like people who are uneducated. The more uneducated you are, the more you don't know what you're approving. And if you don't know what you're approving, isn't that a violation of your fucking consent? It's everywhere. Even the way we have sex, even the way we date. How often do we lie to each other about what we are in order to get into bed with somebody, or in order to have a relationship with somebody? How many of us pretend to be something we're not, to hook people in, only for us to get real comfortable and reveal our real selves after we feel like we've won the prize? And it's not just men, it's women as well. How many of us have done that? Let's be fucking real. How many of us have done that? How many of us have gaslit ourselves even? Robbing our own consent, robbing our own agency. And yes, that is a thing. How many have lied to ourselves in order to continue behavior that we shouldn't be continuing? It happens all the fucking time. All the time. It happens all the time. And you'd be amazed and you'd be horrified to know how often it happens. And once you figure that out, once you start to understand that, it's, you know, when you first awaken to how you've robbed other people of their consent and how you've made other people feel uncomfortable, where you've been emotionally or maybe even physically inappropriate, when all these things start unfurling in your brain, it's horrifying. And that's horrifying even for a normal person. That's horrifying even for a normal person, let alone somebody who's a predator. But that's what happens when we let certain abuses slide. That's what happens when we don't allow ourselves to be bored, annoyed, or offended. That's what happens. What happens is that we end up continuing in behaviors where, you know, we can only really look back at it and try to change when it's too late. That's what happens. And then we're looking back and we're like, Jesus Christ, like, again, normal people, normal fucking people, not just fucking like, again, how many how many of you have coerced a woman into sex? And be fucking honest with me. Be for real. Women, how many of you have tried to coerce men into relationships because of that abuse of power that men engaged in first? And don't lie. Don't lie. Removal of consent, violation of consent, crossing boundaries, all of it. All of it. And again, that's just for normal people, not predators, not sex offenders. That's normal ass fucking people. And those are the consequences of treating our interactions with one another as transactional. Consent is left off the table. It's just the deal and the bottom line. So yeah, we don't really know what consent is for real. We don't really know what consent is for real. That's just, anyway, the next point that I'm going to come to is the shame and the guilt. Now, this is a really tricky one, because calling behavior out immediately, it does lead to shame and guilt, but calling out immediate behavior rather than letting that behavior run in the long run, it actually prevents people from being ashamed and guilty in the long run. So like, if you are calling out behavior that's not illegal, but that could be inappropriate for the victim, if you're calling that out, that's cool, that's fine. And what it might lead to is that person being discouraged to even try something small, let alone something big. And what that will result in is them inevitably carrying less guilt and less shame than they would have done if you'd have just let that shit ride, if you'd have just let them continue the behavior, only for them to work out later that, hey, this is wrong, right? But the thing about predators and the thing about people who don't want to admit that they're wrong is that the shame and guilt is so palpable, it actually collapses in on itself. And it becomes something that that these predators or people who do wrong have to avoid at all costs. So they won't admit what they've done wrong. Or when they're caught out, they will be tempted to weaponize their vulnerability against somebody. I remember there was this one thing that I did to somebody else that was really awful. I'm not going to say what it is, but I sat down in front of the person and I told them what had happened. And immediately when I saw how upset they were and how hurt they were, my natural instinct was to weaponize my vulnerability, not against them, but against the shame and guilt that I was feeling. So I played up my vulnerability. I didn't know better. I was tricked, this, that, and the third. It doesn't matter if I was tricked or if I didn't know. I still did what I did. Doesn't fucking matter. I still did what I did, and that person ended up getting hurt because of it. Like, who the fuck cares? Do you understand what I'm saying? But in that moment, I felt the need to weaponize my vulnerability, because that's what ashamed and guilty people do. They weaponize their vulnerability, or they deny what they've done. These things that they do are a matter of survival. Denial becomes survival. Gaslighting becomes survival. That's another reason why abuse continues. That's another reason why we've got, these grown fucking men out here saying it's my right to date a girl who's as young as possible so that I can feel like a man, because I want new pussy. So it's my right to have new pussy. That's why a lot of these men behave like that. And that's why, there are some older women who make the excuse, well, men do it all the time, so why can't we do it? Like, that's the reasoning behind it. It's that shame and guilt that's collapsed so heavy in on itself that they have to deny that they're wrong in the first place. It's my right to do what I want to do, but that is shame and that is guilt talking. And whilst there is shame and guilt within the hearts of these people who engage in predatory behavior, while there is shame and guilt for being the way that they are, and while there is this dopamine chasing behavior, they will never get better. They will never get better. The thing that they have to do, it's not our responsibility to do, it's their responsibility to do. The thing that they have to do is to find a love and respect for themselves that they don't actually deserve. That's the fucking hardest part of this shit. When you realize how much you contribute as a normal person, let alone a fucking predator. When you discover how much you contribute to the cycle of abuse, how much you have contributed to the cycle of abuse, that there are certain behaviors that you've done that you can't take back, it can be incredibly traumatic. And when that happens, if you were to tell everybody else what happened or what you did or whatever, it would invite them to pile on you out of judgment. It would invite them to pile on you out of judgment to the point where you feel like you would have to weaponize your vulnerability or deny what happened in order to survive emotionally and mentally. So what do you have to do when you realize you've done wrong? You have to find a love and respect for yourself that you don't deserve. That's what unconditional love and radical self-acceptance is. You have to find that self-love and that self-respect that you don't fucking deserve in order to get better. But if you want to get better and if you want to change your life, it's necessary to see the good in yourself. You have to see the good in yourself. You've got no choice. So by doing that, you start to unfurl the abusive behavior, where it comes from, how to stop it, how to realize when you're falling into that trap and how to pull yourself out of it. It's the hardest thing in the world, but you have to find that love for yourself and you have to find that respect for yourself. Like, if you've done wrong and you feel ashamed and guilty to the point where you don't want to do it anymore, you have to find that love and respect for yourself that you don't deserve in order to change your life for the better. As a normal woman, as a woman who's committed a lot less wrong than other people, I had to do that. I had to find a love and respect for myself that I didn't really deserve. Ironically though, because everybody kind of piled on me for minor stuff that I did, it left me with a lot less shame and guilt to deal with than the average person. Do you understand what I mean? It left me with less shame and guilt to deal with than other people around me, because like I always got piled on if I did like even like minor shit wrong. But now I'm at this age and I don't have the shame and guilt to deal with that other people do, because I've, irony of all ironies. And it wasn't even in a good way. Like there are times where like my wrongdoing was weaponized against me so that other people could get away with worse. But here what? I don't have to deal with the shame and guilt that causes me to deny what I am. I don't have to deal with that. At the same time, I still had to find it within myself to find the love and respect for myself where other people would be punitive, and other people would lack compassion, and other people would lack empathy, and other people would lack self-awareness. Warning, though, even for somebody like me, when you find that self-respect and that self-love, the wrongdoing that you've done in the past, it becomes all the clearer. It can be very traumatic to deal with. It can be very disheartening to know that you've done certain things to people, or you've caused people pain that you can't take back. It can be very disheartening, but all you can do is pay everything forward, is to change your behavior from the mistake that you made, and pay, whatever benefits you get from your new self and from your new understanding, pay that shit forward. That's the best that you can do. That's the best that I can do. It's just to pay all the lessons and all the wonderful things that your new self has learned, pay that shit forward. That's all you can do. All you can do is pay that shit forward. And if you get the opportunity to make amends with those that you've hurt, it has to be on their terms and not yours. That's the first thing. Second thing is that you have to have completely stopped the behavior that actually hurt them. Nobody gets a free pass to forgiveness in this world. But yeah, the shame and guilt, that's a big component of why abuse actually continues, and why abuse has, ever increasing cycles. It's because shame and guilt, both from being abused and from being the abuser, that piles on itself, turns itself inwards, and creates denial, keeps abused people in specific situations. Again, that comes back to my first point about victims not being prioritized and listened to. Right? So, it's, it's a difficult one. Like that shame and guilt is a motherfucker, boy. That shame and guilt is a motherfucker. But the most important thing in order to change the cycle of abuse is to listen to victims, which brings me to my, I think that was the second point I made. It really comes down to two things. The first thing is to listen to your bodies and your emotions without judging them. The second thing is to listen to victims first and foremost. Prioritize their comfort, prioritize their healing, prioritize their aftercare, prioritize the victims rather than any recriminations against the perpetrators. It's not because the perpetrators don't deserve recrimination. They absolutely fucking do. In the case of Pauline Chung and what she went through, all I gotta say is dead men don't rape. That's all I have to say about that one. But yeah, that's how I feel about that. That's how I feel about that in one sentence. But the emphasis must be on the victim or the survivor, and listening to them and showing them compassion and talking to them and talking them through stuff. The emphasis has to be on them. And there's one last point that I want to make, and it comes back to this, it comes back to what I talked about before with regards to listening to victims. This last point that I want to make is that most of us have a very punitive attitude when it comes to people who don't fit in. And I'm not just talking about predators. I'm talking about just genuine misfits who don't fit in, or who appear to be doing things that don't fit in with society's rules. I've seen and experienced how easily that shit can be weaponized to the point where people miss actual predatory behavior going on. There is this obsession within us all to punish You know, even we even take rehabilitating wrongdoers more seriously than actually showing compassion for the victims. We have this nasty habit of wanting to severely punish people for not fitting in. And again, it comes back to punishing boredom, annoyance, or thanklessness. It comes back to that. We have this obsession with punishing people who don't fit in. And quite frankly, predators do not deserve to fit in, but there's a reason why predators get off scot-free and misfits don't. It's because you prioritize bullying people who don't subscribe to a certain type of behavior to the point where you miss somebody who is engaging in predatory behavior, but because they appear to be societally approved of, because they are white men, or because they are good looking, or because they are like, you know, or because they appear to be vulnerable on the outside, because they subscribe to gender binaries, or in the case of some like liberal and progressive folk, they say all the right things to talk about progressive talking points, like they say all the right things, because these people express themselves in prescribed ways. It allows them to commit a lot more wrong than the misfit that you are piling on. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say there is an obsession with bullying people who don't fit in. And no, I'm not just talking about myself. Like, truth be told, like, I've been bullied my entire life, but even some of the stuff that I've been through, I mean, even some of the stuff I've been through is nothing compared to some other people have been through. So this isn't about me, right? But, you know, we have this obsession with bullying people who seem a little bit odd and awkward. And we're more likely to notice wrongdoing from odd and awkward people because we don't focus on the action, and we don't focus on how our bodies and our emotions feel around a person. We don't focus on that. We instead focus on how well they can speak our language. We're not focusing on anything else. We're not noticing any red flags because we're too busy focusing on people that speak our language, and that, you know, on people that are, you know, also watch out for vagueness. Watch out for vagueness, and watch out for people who don't appear to be intentional as well. Don't fall into that trap because they use that gray area in order to cross your boundaries. Beware of being around people who are not intentional. I'll get to that in a second. But this isn't going to be the last point, then the misfit point. But yeah, it's not about whether or not somebody fits into society. It's about how the person on the other end feels. Focus on their comfort. Stop trying to focus on punishing somebody just because they're a misfit or just because they seem weird. Focus on the behavior and focus on the feeling of the victim. Do you understand what I'm saying? Focus on that. Focus on that. Okay? What was the next point I was going to make? Because I was talking about misfits and stuff like that. And yeah, I can't remember the next point I was going to make. Let me think of it. Oh, it's one of those things. I have a gap in memory sometimes. So I was talking about misfits, and I was talking about, you know, being fooled by somebody's appearance or what have you. That's how so many powerful people get away with it. Predators know how to camouflage. You know what I mean? I was talking about misfits. What else was I talking about? Yeah. Can't remember now. Because I was talking about how we often prioritize people that like appear to be good to our senses rather than like trusting our deeper emotions on things. I did say that. I can't remember what I was saying. I'm gonna try and remember. Oh, in the meantime, I could hang on a minute. Like, so, nights, predators, misfits. I can't remember. In the meantime, I want to tell you about some upcoming readings on Empress Justice Tarot. I'm going to be doing the elements because we're coming up to Punavasu last quarter moon in Gemini. So on Empress Justice Tarot, I'm going to be doing readings for the elements, which is something that I've never done before. So yeah, that should be interesting. But yeah, I can't remember. I really can't remember what I was about to say. So I'm gonna hang on. Misfits. I'm gonna leave it here. If I remember anything from this video, I'll add an addendum or some shit. In the meantime, I gotta go. Peace and blessings. And my fellow TIs. Oh yeah, gang stalking. Yeah. So everything that I've talked about today, it actually comes back to gang stalking, because gang stalking weaponizes societal conventions in order to cover predatory behavior. It's very important because like, when you don't pay attention to your surroundings and you don't pay attention to body language and you don't pay attention to what somebody is doing closely, people can allow themselves to get caught up in the appearance of vulnerability. Oh my God, that's it. Okay, so now I hit on it, right? I hit on how appearances of masculinity and femininity, like playing societal roles, that's what I wanted to talk about. Playing societal roles effectively, meaning, if you're black, you act a certain way. If you're white, you act a certain way, like stereotypes, right? If you're brown, you act a certain way. If you're a woman, you act a certain way. And if you're a man, you act a certain way. The more approved of that you actually are in the eyes of other people, and the closer the ideal comes to societal expectations, I don't care if it's white supremacy, if it's the culture of indigenous people or brown people or black people or anyone, African people, I don't care like which culture you find yourself in. Stop paying so much attention to societal norms. Remember, breaking the law is not the only reason to nip certain behaviors in the bud. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Breaking laws, the common laws are there to protect people. Well, they're there to protect property. Let's be fucking real. But the laws are there to protect people, right? But don't wait for the law and societal conventions to tell you when specific behavior is not correct. Yeah? Because speaking from experience, I've dealt with people who have weaponized their blackness, weaponized their whiteness, weaponized their brownness, weaponized their femininity, vulnerability, appearing to not know anything, appearing to be scared, fear, weaponizing vulnerability from women, weaponizing anger from men or dominance from men. Like, I have literally been on the receiving end of people weaponizing societal convention in order to get away with predatory behavior. And the reason why it continues is because the people around them feel comfortable with these societal conventions that these people hide behind in order to engage in their predatory behavior. That's the point I wanted to come to. That's the point that I wanted to close on. Stop relying on societal convention to tell you whether somebody's a good person or not. Just because they connect to your sense of aspiration, just because they are aspirational to you, just because they created a piece of music or art that you like, just because they are charismatic, it doesn't mean they're in the fucking right. Even me, right? I'm the type of person who prides herself on integrity. Don't even judge me by how good I make you feel, or how charismatic I am, or by how, how well I can turn a phrase, or by how captivating my presence seems to be online. I know myself. I know every time I watch my videos back, I know how captivating I am as a speaker. I'm not blind. But just because I'm captivating as a speaker and just because I'm intelligent, it doesn't mean that I am a good person. Don't judge me by how well I do shit. Judge me on my behavior, because when you do, you're going to find a complex person. One who loves, one who hates, all of that. Judge me by my actions and judge me by what I am responding to. Do not judge me by how I make you feel with my presentation. Don't judge me by that. Don't judge anybody by that. I don't care how well they fit in or how much they don't fit in. You judge people by their actions. And it's really that fucking simple. It's really that fucking simple. Judge people by what they do. Don't judge people by how it looks. Judge people by the reality of the situations that they are responding to. Judge them by their track record if you must, right? Do not judge anybody by how comfortable they make you feel or how well they fit in with society's rules. Because abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter who's doing it. And, and people responding to, responding to connecting with people that reflect their own failures, responding to aspirational people. That's how we get fucked up. Throwing the halo effect on people is how we get fucked up. Throwing the halo effect on certain types of people and throwing devil horns on another set of people is how we get fucked up and how we allow predation to continue. And again, before I leave, be willing to be fucking bored sometimes. It's not going to fucking kill you to be bored. And it's not going to kill you to be offended. And it's not going to kill you to be annoyed. And it's not going to kill you to not be thanked all the time. The people need to grow the fuck up. That's why these abuse cycles continue. Okay, now I'm going to go. Now I remembered. Ended it on a good note too. Okay, so I'm going to go. I have been Marsha the Great. This has been another video of mine and my fellow TIs. Thank you for joining me. Stay strong, stay blessed, and I will see you in the next one. Peace and blessings. Bye-bye, my darlings.